Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Jeff DeVerter here, Chief Technologist at Rackspace Technology. Hey, we're about to go live in just 30 seconds. And today, it's the AWS Roundup. Everything you need to know from last week from a software developer's perspective. We'll see you in 30 seconds. All right, well, good morning, everyone. Jeff DeVerter here, Chief Technology Evangelist over here at Rackspace Technology. So glad that you're with us here today. Hey guys, as always, love for you to introduce yourselves in the comments of whatever platform you found us on. In fact, I think I'm even going out live on my own LinkedIn. If you guys have found me over on my own LinkedIn, comment and tell me. Tell me who you are, where you are in the world. It's always fun to know. Hey guys, it's all the normal stuff here this morning. Good morning, Morgan. Glad that you are here. Love for you to be like Morgan. Introduce yourselves in the comments and join the conversation. Once we get into all of this, hey, Vineet, once we get into this, and into the discussion, we'd love for this to be not just a discussion with me and Adam, but Adam and I and all of you guys. Now, if you want to get a hold of us over here at Rackspace, want to get a hold of me, just reach out to solve@rackspace.com and you can find us there. Hey, look at all the folks just introducing themselves. I love it. Lots of good friends over from India today as well. Hey, there it is, solve@rackspace.com. If you have some topics, you have some questions, shoot, you may even want to be on here someday. Let me know. Hey, we got someone in from San Antonio. That's where I am. That's awesome. Glad you're here. All right, friends, lots of folks from India. Let's get after this. Now, today, I am super excited to have Adam Fanello on. Now, Adam is a practice manager for our cloud native development capabilities here at Rackspace. Sorry, I just got really excited. Somebody from Pakistan's in for the first time. Glad that you're here, Kamran. And Adam sees cloud native development, well, literally quite all day and probably even in his sleep. And we spent some time going through all of the announcements from last week's AWS reInvent event. And so from a software developer's perspective, we're going to talk about what some of the biggest announcements were and why. Hey, welcome from Belfast. Love that. All right, folks, we follow a pretty common format around here. We'll start with This Week in Cloud, a couple of articles as to what's new in cloud and why it's important to you, followed by cloud releases, a couple of updates from each of the different clouds and why it matters to you. Always why it matters to you and your business. Well, let's start by pushing the right button. Let's start with this one. And I hate to have to start with this one, but it was in the news and it was so impactful and I thought it was important to bring it up. And of course, there was the issue with AWS earlier this week. My wife wondered why she couldn't return items on AWS. My son wondered why Netflix wasn't working. Back when just before I started at Rackspace, I started in 2008, and in 2007 was when they had a big data center outage in their DFW data center. And I can't tell you how many tweets and updates you saw of people saying, Rackspace, will you please turn the internet back on? And that's how I felt this week when this didn't work. Even some of our properties were misbehaving. Shoot, we even used their contact center stuff, and that was misbehaving. So it was a painful issue. Now, a lot of folks who are proponents of, hey, single tenancy, running your data center, are raising their hands going, hey, see, I told you so. You shouldn't do it. But I wanted to ground us for a second as well and say, look, let's realize the fact that computers break, issues happen, people misconfigure things, or sometimes, God forbid, something breaks. Unfortunately, when we use so much of the same thing, those breaks impact so many more people. And over in VentureBeat, there's an article that talks about that shines a light on the need for hybrid. Now, whether or not this is necessarily true, it's an interesting conversation. And I wouldn't necessarily even say that it's hybrid that we need, but what you need is a contingency plan that speaks to what happens when my primary data center goes down. That might be hybrid, running in either your own data center or a Rackspace data center, colo somewhere else in the world. Or it may be utilizing multiple regions. Maybe Adam's going to have an opinion on architecting for that inside of AWS. Or even taking and operating across multiple clouds using Azure in conjunction with AWS or even Google. So things to think about. Now, also in this article, it showed this interesting tweet, and we talk about hybrid. Here's somebody at McDonald's trying to use the interface to buy stuff, and of course the comment is, I'm almost certain that the images for the McDonald's kiosks are hosted in an S3 bucket. Now, this is interesting because it does speak to the fact that the app that runs this thing is still functioning, but the images are not, and so it becomes challenging. It ultimately comes down to application architecture. Again, maybe Adam's going to have an opinion once we bring him up here. All right, let's move on, folks. What I want to talk about now are updates from the different cloud providers. We will start with, of course, AWS. AWS releases a new data center to replace US East 1, which is so powerful. Guys, that's fake news, maybe even wishful thinking. It was the same data center that a year ago in November had an issue. Sorry, as my poor attempt at humor. All right, let's move on to some real updates. So AWS Data Exchange API, So now you can find, subscribe to, and use third-party APIs with consistent authentication. And authentication is one of those ways that things that are being refined inside of each of the clouds. And it is one of those areas that can become obviously a security challenge. If you're having to use multiple identities across multiple locations, well, that becomes hard to manage when updates need to occur. Of course, having a single ID, authentication ID, can be a challenge as well, but it shines the light on the fact that consistency is super important, and it shines a light on the fact that you have got to have a strategy when it comes to security and, of course, identity as well. Hey, someone from Houston's here. Welcome. I lived in Houston for about 9 years. And as I like to say, I got paroled. All right, what's next? Amazon EC2 M1 Mac instances for the Mac OS. So this is super interesting, the fact that they've got a bajillion of these M1s in there. So if you want to work on Apple Silicon and you're as a development environment in preparation, well, now you got a way to do that. So that's impressive, the fact the way they've integrated that into their whole experience. And with these new ones, of course, they're touting 60% better performance over the x86 versions. All right, let's move on to Azure. Over in Azure, immutable storage with versioning for blob storage is now GA. Now, this is super important when we talk about immutable storage. We're talking about storage that really can't be changed. But as you evolve that storage, you can now have timestamps and versionings attached to all of that as well. Again, speaking to consistency of data, and it really has a huge impact in those industries that have deep compliance requirements. Financial services comes to mind, healthcare comes to mind. All right. Also from Azure is Azure Machine Learning has got some updates. Now, what these updates include predominantly is HashiCorp Terraform configuration templates are now supported inside of here and allow you to deploy your Azure Machine Learning resources in a repeatable and a predictable manner, which is great because that's one of the things that will cause your cloud environment, headaches. It'll cause your organization headaches. And if you don't have the ability to do this in a consistent pattern-based format, well, you're opening yourself up for challenges as it relates to security. Because when people are involved and that somebody has hands on a keyboard, it creates opportunity for misconfigurations. All right, over to Google. Preview Cloud Functions. Hey, welcome, Shadib. Glad you're here. Preview Cloud Functions has added support for customer-managed encryption keys. Now, these CMEKs, as they're called, are used to help protect cloud functions and data at rest. This is huge. And the fact not just that it can be encrypted, but it can be encrypted with a customer's own encryption keys that they control, that they hold, and that they manage. Security, 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 everyone. All right, moving on. Cloud SQL for MySQL now supports point-in-time recovery using timestamp. Hey, Louisville, Kentucky. Glad that you're here. I've got a friend who visits there every year, and you can sure know what event that's for. Now, Cloud, what this does is that this new feature allows you to not just recover to whenever they did their last backup or a daily at a specific time, but anytime kind of throughout that day. So giving greater granularity to recovering data should there be any sort of an issue. All right, folks, that wraps up what's new in the cloud from a news perspective, from a release perspective. Again, speaking to the value that we try to bring to you here every single day, and that is our ability to help decode what's happening out in the cloud, out in technology, and ultimately make it more consumable and easy for you to be able to turn that off, to be able to decode what's happening and apply technology appropriately to your own environments and help your companies along. All right, folks, with that, it's now time for me to bring up Adam. Adam, why don't you, or Daniel, why don't you bring Adam on up here? And there he is. Adam
Hello.
Fanello, it's your first time on Solve Live. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, so glad that you are here. Now, guys, I was chatting with Adam before we started, and his mic was not quite working, but we got that working. There's a little bit of a delay, but don't be distracted by that. It's all good. Now, Adam, so first of all, let's go back to some of those news things. We talk about creating applications that span either regions or span cloud infrastructure.
Right.
I know I have my opinions. What are your thoughts on that from a solution architect perspective?
Well, it's pretty much a given that you want to be multiple availability zones. That's pretty easy. Multiple regions for disaster recovery. I mean, these are the givens. You look at any kind of well-architected framework, they're going to tell you to do that. The interesting thing about the outage, though, was it yesterday or 2 days ago?
It was 2 days ago.
2 days ago was that it took out some of Route 52, 53. The DNS provider. So some people who had disaster recovery with rollover to other regions still went down. So we still haven't received word of just what happened. But yeah, there's only so much you can do. Just like if you were to self-host, things are going to happen, as you say.
That's right.
You still get more reliability on the cloud. And certainly, you didn't see anybody around here scrambling to fix it. We just wait for Amazon to fix it because that's their job. So it certainly takes the stress off as well.
Certainly takes the stress off, and that's really also the one main message, and you really hit it. And that is the fact that there are humans and computers involved, and computers break, and humans. For as many safeguards as we put in place, sometimes something just happens. And whether that is in how the cloud itself operates, whether that's the configuration of the environment, again, the blast radius just gets larger when everybody's in one big cloud and it impacts a bunch of people. But it's important to keep in mind all of the benefits that all of these providers who did feel the pain on Tuesday didn't feel for the past year or 2 years or 3 years that they might have felt if they were in a different cloud or like you call out, self-hosted.
Right.
Well, Adam, let's get into the topic of the day, because I've watched a lot of the announcements. I was not in over at reInvent, but I was glued to YouTube watching things happen. But I'm anxious from a soft, and there were announcements from infrastructure, development environments, AWS, machine learning, analytics, data. I mean, across the board. A company of this size and a cloud of this size has huge amounts of areas for improvement. But from a software developer's perspective, maybe what's the first thing that's on your list of things that caught your eye, and why is it important?
There was a lot. It was a very evolutionary reInvent. Lots of little updates that took away a lot of pain points.
Right.
They were particularly good with event-driven architectures. There's quite a few improvements there for EventBridge, the ability to send your S3 events through EventBridge and filter. Previously, we could trigger off of a Lambda or whatever else we want off of S3, something going into S3, which is the big data bucket. But it was just, you had no configuration. Something went into that bucket, it fired this Lambda. And if your Lambda is like transcoding the thing and putting it back in the bucket, it then gets called with what it just put into the bucket as well. And so that created some headaches. So now we have the ability to filter and only receive events that we want. And the same thing was extended to SQS and DynamoDB. Again, the service layer, the queuing service and DynamoDB, similar to S3, they can trigger events when data is written. And Kinesis. All of those, we can now configure the source to a Lambda to be, to filter, so that we don't just receive everything. We can only pick and choose what we want, and that saves you from firing up Lambdas and paying for compute time just to throw events away that you're not interested in.
So
and it's a little thing, right? It's,
so I think this is huge.
All these big announcements, but as a software developer, it's like, oh, wish I had that before.
I know. And that's one of the areas, and I call this out when I do these different, here's a release from Amazon, here's a release from Azure or Google, is less and less do we have these big announcements of, hey, we now support this thing that never existed before, and here you go. It's more refinement to make that experience, to make that support experience, management experience, development experience just a little better every time. I mean, look back to the timestamp recovery that I think it was Google that had announced. I mean, they had a check mark when they released backup and recovery, and that was, can we do it? Can we do it in a moderately granular way, maybe daily? But now to put it in control of the user is huge. And now when we talk about these filter, the ability to filter these types of events coming out of S3, I mean, let me ask you this question. S3 was one of the first services deployed in AWS, correct?
I believe it was the first. Is it
the first
or second?
That's right.
EC2 or S3, they were 1 and 2.
And so that's 15 years ago. And this is one of the things I so appreciate about AWS. 15 years ago, and the first thing that comes out of your mouth is, hey, they updated S3 and it makes it even better. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and they've maintained compatibility at the same time, which is also amazing. I think the API has changed once in those 15 years.
Yeah, and that's huge because it gives you that consistency of deployment. Let me ask you a question. What year did you deploy your first workload into AWS? If you were to hazard a guess. And while you think about that, I'll say hey to Philip. Glad you're here. 17. Look at that. And still evolving. All right, so it's those incremental evolutions that makes your experience as a developer, as ultimately then into users and that user experience even better. So what's second on your list?
Well, we got a little more merging of, I'm getting an echo. Well, more urging of the. They just got worse. It's so distracting to hear yourself like that. Okay, so it's more DevOps. So as a developer, we have to take more and more control now of the infrastructure because that's part of the promise of serverless in the cloud. It's not just let me go write some JavaScript or Java or C#. Especially with something like event-driven architectures, you are dealing with Event Bridge in S3, and so you're building up architecture as part of your software. And so, again, Evolution CDK just released version 2, and along with Construct Hub, and they're continuing to evolve that. So now we could build infrastructure not as a YAML file, but in the very language that we're writing our application logic in. And so I actually have a member of my team right now who's helping build out an accelerator to allow us to build applications faster. It's sort of a ground running, here's your starting point for a new cloud application. And so we're set up to run the business logic in TypeScript, and we're building the infrastructure also in TypeScript. And so you only need to know that one thing.
I love that. I love the fact that you guys are taking something released last week and now you're creating accelerators to make the development process even easier. And of course, the fact that, again, refining how the cloud operates. Sure, you could create your infrastructure via YAML file, but wouldn't it be easier if it was just in the native, a construct that you're using?
Yeah. And it allows for more reuse too. I mean, I was starting to hack around, having to do things in a static as opposed to dynamic way of defining the infrastructure. So
Yeah.
it's a big thing. So I also want to shout out Rust and Swift, and I forget what else is that they're now officially supported languages. There are software development kits for
Yeah.
them. So we've been able to use those languages for a while, but by Lambda layers, or of course just EC2
Yeah.
instances, and generally I think they had to call down to the C SDK. But now there is software development kits for those languages, so we have more options.
So I love also the fact that they are continuing to expand, not just in the depth of individual areas, but the just making it easier for developers, to have a supported language that works best for their environment, for their application, whatever that might be. Hey, Percy, glad first time watcher from San Antonio. Glad you're here, Percy. Um, and kind of along with that, and I was anxious to ask you this question as a developer.
Sure.
So it seems one of the trends that I see and I'm observing, and I saw a lot of it coming out of Microsoft. You see a lot of it coming out of just third party folks, and that is this push towards more low code type of
Hmm.
development environments. And we saw that coming out of AWS as well. You see it in their their SageMaker canvas. So the ability to do machine learning development in a somewhat WYSIWYG kind of drag and drop sort of way. First of all, opinions on that technology, but second of all, maybe add into that as a developer, how does it make you feel?
uh, it's actually not a threat, because the technology is always evolving. This is nothing new to us. It used to
Yeah.
be you had to hire a developer just to put up a static web page,
Just a
and now
basic
you
web
have
page.
content management systems, so anybody can do it. It's the same thing with these sort of applications. You want it to solve a solution that's within the wheelhouse of these tools, and it works for you. Use it. Um, Generally, it is still developers who actually use those tools because you have to know how to work with these things. It's like everybody can use Excel and do add up some numbers, but
Right.
not everybody does Visual Basic for
Oh,
applications.
that's an amazing
Right.
example that you just gave, and I'm going to absolutely steal that in every future conversation because I think it's a perfect way to describe it. Everybody's, used to be you had your users on one hand and you had your developers on the other, and there's this gulf in between. So, really what you're saying here is that now with that low code environment that exists in between, it makes the developers' jobs easier because now instead of having to handwrite everything, they can utilize an interface to jumpstart or accelerate some of their development. But for that smaller percentage of the users who are more tech literate, they can start to dabble and maybe create some basic solutions on their own, but they're very confined to the sandbox.
Yeah, and those might become our future developers. But
So true.
all those solutions, the same thing in back to the analogy of using WordPress to develop a web app. You can use WordPress to make a web app. But if you want to develop your banking application, you're not using
Mhm.
WordPress.
You're not
You're
using WordPress.
hiring a
God,
software
I hope they're
developers.
not using WordPress.
So it's the complicated differentiating solutions that we target. That's always been the case. It's just the line moves over time.
Got it.
But
Hey, sustainability was a big call out. What are your thoughts there?
yeah, I'm all for keeping the spaceship that we all live on, supporting life. So I think it's great that sustainability is now a pillar of the well architected framework at AWS.
Yeah.
They'll be coming out with a carbon footprint tool, so you can actually see it. Um, and as I've long been working on when AWS, I've been a proponent of serverless and
Yes.
cloud in general, obviously. And that is one thing that was called out. There's no way you can get lower carbon footprint than doing serverless in the cloud. If you're running your own data center, you have to have machine spinning running for your peak load,
That's
even
right. All the
in
time
the
you
middle of the
do.
night,
All the
all
time.
the time, always consuming electricity, always polluting. When you go serverless and cloud, you're just using the compute and the storage and whatever that you need. It scales
Yeah.
up exactly according to your needs, and because it's distributed across all the customers, those processors are running like 99% utilization. Something you
which is
cannot
which
do with
is
your
what
own servers.
which is exactly what you want. Granted, it's making a little more heat, but you don't have a lot of processors sitting around consuming and doing absolutely nothing. Hey, here's a question for those of you who are still watching with us today. How much does sustainability fit into your software development or your organizations? Just comment in the chat down there below or above or to the side or to the left. Or I don't know what it is where you're looking at it. Hey, we got a couple of other first time watchers out there. Somebody from New Jersey on the support side. Glad you're here again. Percy from San Antonio, we're glad that you're here. But it really, when you go back to the sustainability conversation, we used to just think of it in raw effort, to maintain the power, the place, and the internet pipes that go into an environment. So not only is it, the excess capacity on the processor, but it's the physical capacity inside of that room. It's the resources to create that room, then to cool that room. And then you layer on top of that, Adam, you really got my brain thinking about this. You layer on top of that is, these cloud providers have the wherewithal to create these massive data centers. They also have the wherewithal to design and build and architect them in a way that is sustainable as possible.
As efficient as possible, yeah. And the
I know I was
efficiency,
visiting with the
the low
Microsoft.
cost, and sustainability all go hand in hand.
Yeah. I was talking to it's been a couple of years now, but the guys who design Microsoft data centers. And I'm here in San Antonio, out on the west part of San Antonio, out 151, if you know where that is where the Microsoft South Central Data Center is. And they're designing data centers in South Texas, mind you, that aren't cooled. No air conditioning. But the way they're designed to bring airflow through is really just pretty impressive. So,
I know
hey, Philip,
Microsoft tried to doing a deep ocean data center. They actually just dunked it
just sunk the
in
thing.
the ocean, stayed cool in there.
Why not? Why not? Right? Self-cooling down there. Not like you have to pump air down there. And if
Right.
you have designed for failure, meaning if a blade fails, if something fails, and you've got lots of extras and the
Yeah.
software architecture to work around
Yeah,
that.
when 20% of them fail, then you bring them back up to the service and swap them out, dunk it
That's
back
right.
in.
That's right. Impressive. Impressive. Hey, we've got just a couple of minutes. If there was one more thing you were going to talk about that impressed you about reInvent from a software developer's point of view, what would that be?
Oh, well, this is more from an everybody point of view. Is the new Graviton processors and all the variations of those. But the Graviton 3 now coming out. We just got Graviton 2. Just started looking at those and seeing how I don't have to do anything. I mean, I literally change one line in my infrastructure as code, and now it's running cheaper.
That's
I mean,
incredible.
that's all it is. I mean, if you're using a compile language like Rust or C, then you have to recompile. But I primarily
Right.
work in Node.js, so it's interpreted language. Just configuration change, and now you're more sustainable and paying less. Done.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
that was Graviton 2 that we just started using. Now Graviton 3 cuts that price and increases the performance, thus in the value even further.
Right. Well, and aren't we really now just speaking to an additional value that the hyperscale cloud brings to it, and that is if we have abstracted infrastructure from our brain, so as that infrastructure improves underneath us, well, sometimes we reap the benefits, but sometimes
Yeah.
you flip a variable, you change a line, and all of a sudden you get to all the benefits of all that work, and now it just costs less, it runs faster, fill in the blank for whatever the value is.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Cloud's an amazing place, people. Dip your toe in. Hey, Philip Wyatt, a regular watcher of the show, is posting some really interesting things here, folks. So Zscaler strategy is 100% renewable. He's got an article there. You should go check that out if you haven't clicked on it already. Maybe don't leave this page. You can look at it in the background because this is great. Well, Adam, Fanello, this has been a great conversation. Thanks for getting up earlier, a West Coaster, and it's not lost on us that you've gotten up way before many people do.
Yeah, the sun's actually rising now. But
Hey, well, go get a coffee and say hi to the family. But
the sun may be rising, but it never sets on Rackspace technology.
yeah, look at you, a little commercial for it. I love it. All right, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode, or today's episode of Solve Live. Know that we are here every Tuesday and Thursday from 8:30 Central Time until 9 o'clock. 30-minute program. Next week is really our last full week of doing these, I believe, if I have my calendar correct. And we'll be off for the last 2 weeks of the year. I may show up and just do something for fun. But other than that, we hope to see you on Tuesday at 8:30 Central Time. I believe we're going to have the Rackspace CTO in here talking about the future of technology and what's coming down the road that's got him really excited. And I've heard this talk before. You're going to want to be here for that conversation. That'll be a reminder on Monday. Everyone, I hope you have an amazing day. Adam, thank you so much for being here. And folks, we will be back on Tuesday.